how do you adjust that message then in these types of conversations for each age group? Are there cues from our kids that we can use to shape the discussion? And the age groups mentioned in the questions range from preschool age on through college age young adults. So there's quite a range there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, I think on Friday, I'm a mom of 3 ranging from 5 to 11. And I just was like, I had the same reaction, I think, as all parents, even as psychologists, like, okay, where to start? And I'll just share with you that what I did was I sat all 3 of my kids down because it was a rapid, very fast thing that happened. And I directed the message at the youngest of the age group, right? So I started with a very basic, brief and simple, concrete example models for my 5-year-old. And then I followed up with my older children later. So I'll start with elementary, and Sarah can chime in at any time, but really we want to keep things very brief and simple with elementary age children. And I think back to your point, I think we want to be proactive, but you do want to listen to their questions, which can help you lead your answers, right? We don't need to insert things that are above what they're understanding. And they are a really good place to sort of start with where their heads are. We need to sort of get a sense of where that is. So listen to their questions, hear what they have to say, keep it brief and simple, and concrete examples are really important. So like reviewing safety. So how I explained it to my 5-year-old was I said, you know how you do those safety drills at school? You do those to keep yourself safe, right? And it's really good practice. And so what happened today is we're doing more practice of different ways to keep you safe today. The way to keep you safe is to keep you home. And that's how we're gonna, on and on. I want to circle back to one thing really quickly, which I think is actually important that Sarah and I discussed as we sort of wanted to sort of put this out there a little bit first. And Sarah, feel free to chime in, which is, it's so important for us to check in with our own worry before we talk to our children about these things. Parents actually tend to worry anecdotally more than children do about these topics. Like Sarah mentioned, children are very egocentric. They're develop appropriately and developmentally. And so they're worried about what's happening right now, right in front of them. That really is a protective factor for them in terms of like bigger catastrophic anxiety sort of feelings. And it's important that we keep our anxieties also, as we have seen in our own experiences here in Pelham, it can be very contagious. So we really want to be able to self-regulate and contain our anxiety when we're about to have these conversations with our children, because research shows that if we have increased emotional reactions, it increases the distress of a child, right? So I just wanted to take a little bit of a second to say, Sarah and I can talk a little bit about how to do that, a little later in the talk, but I think it's really important that we model that. Tying into that a little is, putting these things for ourselves in proportion, right? So real risk versus feared risk. If we look at the research, school shootings are really actually a very low probability, right? So there's possibility, probability. And we have to be really, to self-soothe ourselves, we have to say, look, the probability is very low, that this will happen. That doesn't mean it's not possible and that's not scary, but we don't want to make something bigger than it is, right? When we talk to our children about it. So I just wanted to put that out there. So I think keeping that in mind, again, with the early elementary, we really want to keep it brief and simple, use concrete examples. And as I said, use their real life, what they're doing in their real life for safety procedures and protocols. And that can be really reassuring. For upper elementary and early middle school, I think it's really important to be mindful that fantasy is developmentally very appropriate. So we want to really keep everything grounded in reality. What's really happening right now? What are the things that are, happening in the school, the procedures, the things that you already know, you practice, what they are every day. Because we don't want to feed into this sort of magical thinking that's developmentally appropriate, and that's okay. But in these situations, we really want to keep it grounded. Again, I think it's a little bit of practicing, discussing with this middle age group, like, how to be a good member of your school community, how to talk, notice if someone feels nervous or, those types of things, and sort of reiterate that to these children. And then in upper middle school and high school, kids are a lot more opinionated. You can see they'll come in with ideas like the school should be doing this and the school should be, and I think that's really, it is their developmentally appropriate effort to have agency and independence and separate and individuate. And so, without putting a burden on them, which I think is extremely important, grownups are in charge of keeping children safe, period. But we do think it's okay for them to have a role in, following the protocols and making sure that they feel involved and have agency in that, that they know how things, go, and so they can feel more in control when there is like this more loss of sense of control. And it's also really important to validate in older adolescents their feelings. It tends to actually, like sort of what Sarah was saying, with when we talk about it, it actually reduces anxiety. If we validate their feelings, it actually reduces their worries. Excuse me. And so it is important to do that. And then I think with this older adolescent group, it is important to do sort of what Sarah and I were talking about in terms of self-regulation. It is really important to engage them in possibility versus probability, and sort of not following our automatic fear reactions, and slowing down, stopping, thinking, and self-regulating, so that their brains are a little bit more primed to be able to do that. They're still children, but we should model that for them. And the older adolescent group is more able to take that in.
Yeah, I think one other thing to note is that your early elementary and your middle school kids, they're going to want probably more comfort from you, the parent. I have a feeling that the older kids are going to really need access to their peers to sort of help them get through this. They need you too, but we also want them to be able to have this time developmentally, they're oriented towards their peers to kind of ground themselves. And so it is okay for them, giving them an opportunity to call a friend and talk it out, or get together with a group of peers. Maybe you could host, some friends over to like just soothe, have a nice night where we don't have to hash and rehash, but we can just kind of like connect, because connection with peers is actually a really important thing for that age group. And we want to support that and allow them to do that.